Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first beer tasting of 2022. Happy New Year to you all, and Happy New Year to you, Rupert. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy New Year to everyone, and you as well. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, if you're joining us, obviously we are doing an Annex event just in time for my Annex glass that I've been using for the last however many months to actually break, like the week before the Annex tasting, which was perfect timing. So tonight we have the Idle Hands Pils, the Staircase Wit, the Genus Prunus Sour, and the Borrowed Time Baltic Porter. And for those of you at home, that is the tasting order for tonight. So we'll be starting with the Pilsner. Now, this was, I think this started as a seasonal and then it kind of outgrew that designation to the point where now it's full time.
That's exactly right. So it was the last summer seasonal that we made, and we kind of got away from the way that we talk about our beers. So we used to do what a seasonal we would consider to be sort of 6 months. So we would do spring, summer, and then what one that would follow it would be a fall, winter. So this was so successful for us as a seasonal. That we decided to make it a full-time beer. Our core beers aren't set in stone, so this actually replaced our XPA, which was a core beer for the longest time.
Yeah, it was the last of the original founding beers, which I feel like we kind of jinxed it when we talked about its longevity last time we did one of these. And then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, now it's been axed in the time since we've last spoken.
It took a while for the axe to actually fall. We had been talking about it for a long time, but no, I think Idle Hands just fits the portfolio a lot better. It's the first full-time lager that we have, and I think that kind of speaks to where we are as a brewery now that we're able to have a full-time lager, as it takes a lot more tank time, a lot more scheduling is involved, and I think we're just kind of a bit more organized as a brewery now, and we're able to sort of have a full-time stock of it. So
now I will ask, so this is an Italian Pilsner. Now, the first Italian Pilsner I ever had was actually Pontificato from SYC. Mm-hmm. How did you get introduced to Italian Pils, or was it the same way I did?
Yeah, I mean, I had Italian lagers before, and maybe not knowing that they were Pilsners, but I think really getting into the details of what an Italian Pilsner is was kind of learning about Idle Hands when we first came out with that. So, I mean, the basic difference is that it's a German Pilsner that's been dry hopped, usually with European hops. So the Annex take on it is that there is Mosaic in it as well. So that's a North American hop. And then Saz. So yeah, it's an Annex take on Italian Pilsner.
So I already have a question coming in. People are asking about the malt bill on this one. Is it 100% Pilsner malt?
I think it is. This was actually something that I was talking with Andrew earlier about, and yeah, it's 100% as far as I know.
And do you guys use Canadian Pilsner malt, or do you do imported? Because I know some people are really picky about their Pilsner malt, and they'll pay the extra bucks to get the German stuff.
I believe it's Canadian.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not too familiar with the malt bill, the grain bill on this one, but I'm pretty sure it's Canadian. Yeah.
Nice. So you mentioned that this has seen a change to the core beers. Let's talk a little bit about 2021 kind of in the rearview mirror here. We'll try to keep it as positive as we can. 2021 was a weird year, but I mean, there were some big hits for you folks. Like you had some awesome beers come out. When you're looking back on 2021, what will you remember, A, for Annex, and B, just the beers you remember from last year? What were the beers that stood out to you, whether they were Annex or otherwise?
I think for myself, it was kind of thinking about what sets Annex apart from other breweries. The explosion of breweries in Alberta really sort of made us look at how we can be different and how we can innovate, and really, yeah, what we can do to set us apart from the pack. So something that I was a huge fan of was one of our latest releases, Lost Causes, which was the cherry pomegranate lacto dry hop sour. So that was introducing mixed fermentation into our steel fermenters. So that's usually avoided simply because of the risks involved of contaminating the rest of the brewery. So it put a lot of stress on the brewers, and I do think that the effort that went into it was definitely worth it. I think that beer was fantastic, and it's probably going to be the start of a bit more exploration into that and what that can look like.
I think we've seen more of the mixed fermentation beers, or at least the small and large format glass bottles from you this last little bit than we've seen in quite some time. I'm really loving that you're doing more. I hesitate to call them special editions, but let's throw them in as special editions. I like that that's a new direction you guys have been going. That's been really fun. Personally, I really like sponsored content more than Lost Causes, but I think they were both really nice.
Yeah, I mean, like, so sponsored content came out of the foeder, and that was, that beer took 12 months in the foeder. Definitely like a labor of love. Further 2 months being bottle conditioned. So, yeah, I would expect there to be a bit more complexity in that beer. And I'm super thankful that it paid off. I think that beer is fantastic as well. But yeah, those two were the first releases in the 500 ml format, and I think we're gonna look into the opportunity of or the options of putting those beers into cans going forward as well. I just think people see bottles and they're a little afraid to pick it up. And with bottles come a higher price point as well, unfortunately.
But it's also this was kind of your first forays into doing the 500 ml format with everything else. It's always fun to see those first steps because they're always so interesting. And it's not like the fooders are hidden in the back; they're right in the tasting room, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, and even with that, I think a lot of people don't realize that we have that program. Those beers really shine at beer fests. People gravitate towards the bottles when they're on the table, but unfortunately, when they're on shelves at liquor stores, maybe people don't grab for them as easily. So I'm not sure what that is, but
I would also say that the single tall format has really slowed down. The singles fridge, especially since we started doing the build your own 4-pack station, I think the 4-pack tall can, one of the things that really changed during the pandemic was, we were just starting to see the transition out of 6-pack 355s into 4-pack 473s, but that really became the de rigueur packaging format for beer in Alberta. I mean, if you're not in 473 4-packs, like, what are you doing? Even the last couple of holdouts like Snake Lake have recently started moving back towards doing that as kind of their core range. It's interesting how preeminent that format has become, considering that, like, when Blind Man started doing it, it was like, what are you trying to be, Guinness? Like, nobody was doing 4-pack talls. It was wild.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of that comes from the convenience. Well, I say convenience, but a lot of people just couldn't afford their own canning machines in their canning lines. So having to pay for the inconvenience of somebody else coming into the brewery to package your beer, and if the beer wasn't ready, it didn't matter. You still have to get it packaged. So people were more likely to try and bottle things and could do that on their own timeline. But now, as breweries are growing, they're able to have their own canning lines and sort of work on their own schedule a little bit. And now I think you're going to have to see bottles on shelves as something special. That's usually what the indication is now, is that you're going to be picking up something that's maybe barrel aged or foeder aged, or something that a bit more time went into.
I'm actually finding that for singles, I'm very often struggling to find more like mainstream. Oh, this is just a Pilsner. Oh, this is just an IPA. It's very often the barrel-aged imperial stout or the foeder-aged sour or the brandy barrel-aged barley wine or something in that vein. And I don't think that's a bad direction for that format to go, just because we've been seeing shrinking sales for the format year over year over year out of the singles fridge. If it becomes the limited edition rare stuff, you got to have it and it's going to sell out fast, it would certainly breathe some new life into what's a pretty flat category for us. I like that idea of that's a direction that the whole format can move, because it's been shrinking for years.
Yeah. But yeah, and the other thing is, with that format, I think usually the beers that come in bottles, they're something that you're going to want to share for the most part. And unfortunately, due to COVID, there haven't been as many sort of get-togethers and what have you. So that's definitely why we took that into account when we moved from the larger format bottle to the 500 mil. That's just something that we kind of kept in mind as well.
Yeah, 750 to me is really a bottle share sort of thing, and bottle shares weren't a thing last year. So yeah, 500 ml is much more accessible. Even though it's only a beer and a half, it seems like more. It seems like a bottle of wine, like an evening commitment, rather than 3 cups of beer. It's really not that much, but it seems like more.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, they're not always higher ABV beers, but they definitely tend to be.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So would you say that the Lost Causes was your favorite Annex beer last year, or was there something else throughout the year that you kind of still carry a torch for, that you want to see come back?
I think maybe one of my favorite beers that we put out this year also would have been Loudhailer. That was the beer that we kind of released with no social media. The whole idea, it was more a beer, a concept beer than anything. And then the actual beer itself ended up being fantastic, and
it really was. It was the beer I couldn't talk about, but I always wanted to. And I think everybody got really sick of this beer that I would talk about on the weekly beer taste. It's like, I can't tell you what it is, but it's really good. And if you come in, I can tell you about it.
Yeah.
And I think everybody got really tired of me talking in circles.
Like it was fun for people who worked in stores and stuff, and they were like, they had something exciting to talk about. And it wasn't just another beer. It was more of an idea, and then the beer sort of propped it up. But we released so many beers that I'm trying to think back. Loudhailer was definitely a standout for me, though.
Yeah, it was for me as well. I liked that beer. And again, the problem with the pandemic is it all kind of runs together. It's like I was going to say original echoes, but I think that was actually 2020.
That's right. Yeah.
Is that going to come back? We were going to talk about the future here in a bit, but and you mentioned before we got started that you have a whole bunch of IPAs and pale ales all queued up for the next little while.
Yeah.
Is Original Echoes one of them?
It's not coming out anytime soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if that beer were to be released again next year. Speaking of beers that I was happy that came back, we actually released it twice this in 2021. Was Focal Shift.
Yes.
And that reminded me how much I love West Coast IPAs, because I think that was a style that had totally disappeared from beer shelves everywhere, and our brewers knocked that one out of the park. Was really happy that came back, and yeah, it reminded me of that like really good bitter IPA. Yeah, big fan of that beer. So
Focal Shift was the one that I had a pint of every time I went to Annex. And I spent a lot of time in the Annex tap room because it's, I go up and I have to go to 88 and Cabin and Establishment. It's like, by the time I'm done picking everything up, I want lunch and I want a beer. And the only one with food service at that hour of the day is Annex. And I really like Little Empire. So, and then I made the terrible mistake when my wife was having all the eye surgeries of introducing her to Little Empire. So, because it's right by the Calgary Eye Center. So now every time she comes up, it's like, no, we have to go to Annex. I'm like, oh no, I have to have a pint of Annex with my lunch? What a terrible shame. Yes, let's go to Little Empire. What a wonderful idea.
Well, I'm glad we can provide that for you guys. But yeah, I think West Coast IPAs are you're going to see a lot more of them this year, I guess.
Is that your first bold prediction for 2022? More West Coast IPAs?
I think so. Yeah, I think you're going to see some people trying to cash in on that for sure.
Well, let's go on to bold prediction number 2. I know this is technically something that came out in 2021, but Staircase Wit. I'm struggling to remember the last time a brewery made like a seasonal wit that either A, I gave a damn about, because let's be honest, when New England IPA was the craze, that's all anybody wanted. It's wonderful to see someone doing a wit, and B, such a dry, classic wit. Like, I almost think this is drier than a lot of Belgian examples. This is so clean and fresh and pretty. I don't want to give anything away, but I don't traditionally like Belgian wits. I think this is my favorite thing on the table. Like, I absolutely adore Staircase, and this is, you know me, this isn't my type of beer. I don't like this. I love this.
This is not a style of beer that I would ever reach for. I think I'm the same way. Something that I had to do in my past, my previous job was basically to learn what consisted of a good beer of a style that I don't like. And this is something that has sort of changed my opinion on this style because I really like this beer. It's the first time Annex has ever used wheat in the brewery.
Really?
That might surprise you.
That shocks me.
It's pretty shocking. Turns out Andrew, one of the owners, thought he was allergic to wheat for the longest time. But he was just treating his body like garbage, apparently, and so it wasn't anything to do with wheat. So we started to introduce wheat into our beers, and this is the first attempt. And I think it's fantastic. You get a lot of citrus, a lot of tropical fruit and spice. And then it's conditioned on Caracara oranges, so you get even more of that. But yeah, I think it's just fantastic.
Oh, I like this so much. This is such a surprise. Now, we do have some questions that I've apparently been ignoring here, so give me a second to get back here. Eric asked about the Pilsner. Is the Saaz responsible for like the bitter drop-off, that bitter finish on this, or do you think that's more from the Mosaic? Because I think the Mosaic's more in the aroma, but...
I would think that it's maybe more of the Saaz. But I think that's also what makes a good Italian Pilsner is that bitter finish. because it's not a bad bitter finish. It keeps you going back for another sip.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I really like that about that beer as well.
Well, no, and Eric, don't worry about going slow on this one. I'm gonna take my time with Staircase here because this is a style that, like I said when I opened, nobody's really been doing wits, and I think that to a point, New England IPA has jumped the shark a little tiny bit. If someone makes an absolutely incredible one, there will always be more room for them, especially if Original Echoes came back. But yeah, my big prediction is going to be, we've had people. It's almost become a running joke here with our beer tasting series that people are all about ESBs, but I'm kind of excited that maybe now that, you don't have to make a new New England IPA every month, maybe we're going to see more wits or more bitters, or somebody's going to make an old ale or something really wild. I feel like for the first time, the market's a little more new and open, and maybe we'll see the return of white IPA or rye IPAs, or just different things. That it's just been so IPA focused. And you know how I feel about IPA. I love them, but even I've gotten a little tired of it. I'm hoping that this beer, this Staircase Wit, is, even though it's a 2021 beer, our first new beer of 2022 in a year where we're going to see a little more variety.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, I think people want to look for what's going to set them apart. Finding these styles that people don't do very often or do at all is one way to get attention. Unfortunately, from my point of view, as a sales guy, the
IPAs are going to sell.
Yeah, Staircase Wit's a fantastic beer, but there are lots of places that wouldn't even bring it in just because of the style. And
well, I mean, not to be judgmental, but fuck those people.
And I mean, even if people were to bring it in, they'd bring in half of what they would if it were a New England IPA. So I'm hoping we'll see some changes to that in the next year or so. And the demand for other styles is there. I think the general level of beer education in Alberta is at a point now where people aren't scared to try new things, and they're more willing to, even if they had tried this style of beer a couple of years ago, and didn't like it, they'd be more willing to try it now.
I think that's really savvy. I think people are waiting for the next big thing. I flatter myself to think I've got a reasonable idea of what the market's doing right now, and I sense a great tension. Everybody's waiting for the next big thing, whatever it's going to be. And who knows, it might be Belgian wit. Probably not. But, I really want to see what this next big thing is going to be for 2022. I mean, 2020 was the year of the New England IPA, and 2021 was just more of the same, but with some variations, kind of more no-coast IPAs with a little more West Coast influence. People starting to dabble with West Coast with the focal shift, and we saw that from a few breweries. I get this big waiting sensation from people right now. They want to see what's going to happen. And for me, this is such a hopeful year because we don't know what it's going to be yet. And I'm so eager to find out. I hope it's not something awful like, strawberry sweetened lagers or something. But, like that horrible year where everybody decided to fall in love with Radler really hard in like 2016 or so. Let's hope it's not that. But I feel this great tension, this breaking point that's coming where people are going to embrace a new style, and I think this is the year for it. And I'm really excited to see what it's going to be. Also, heady question, is there more Staircase Wit to buy if it's been a slow seller? Because I want more.
I was really optimistic when this beer was released, and when we were planning this beer. So we actually planned 2 batches of it. So the second batch was only just recently packaged.
Oh, good.
So
there
yes,
is more.
there is some available. Yeah.
People loving the wit. Eric asks, can we review what makes a wit a wit? Is it just the wheat?
It's the wheat. I mean, this particular one was fermented with Belgian wit yeast. So obviously using a wit yeast. And
The orange citrus component.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, Annex being Annex, it's dry hopped as well with Citra and Mandarina. So even more citrus.
So yeah, a wit is traditionally a wheat beer brewed in the Belgian style. They generally tend to be a touch sweeter than this. I appreciate how dry this is. Citrus is a big component. Can be spiced with coriander. In fact, very often is. And then yeah, the wit, the yeast that you use can throw off clove. It's somewhat related to a saison yeast, but maybe not as wild.
I think a big part of the reason why I like this one is because it's not as sweet. And is much drier than most, yeah.
And it also doesn't have the phenolic thing a lot of wits do. I find they can come off kind of plasticky, and I don't get any of that in this, which I appreciate. Which actually led Devin to remark that he didn't think it was made with wit yeast. He thought it was actually being made with French saison yeast because it was so dry and because it didn't have that phenolic plasticky character. He actually thought it was a saison yeast, which I thought was very clever. But he was wrong, so tomorrow I'm going to make fun of him. So now we kind of touched on it briefly as we move into the genus Prunus, that you've changed your seasonal style. You said you used to do them on kind of 6-month rotations, and then we started talking about your barrel age program, and we kind of abandoned that topic of conversation. Do you want to tell me a little bit about what Annex's new seasonal program and sour program is going to look like coming into next year?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, Idle Hands was the last of the long-term seasonals. The focus now is more on more small batch releases. I'd like to see even more small batch releases this coming year. But what getting rid of the long-term seasonal has made room for is a new sour series. So Genus Prunus is the first in that series. Peach plum, apricot, stone fruit, kettle sour. It's dry hopped, of course.
Guess what wouldn't be on an Annex?
That's right. But yeah, so part of the reason why this came about was we kept on hearing that there's a very, very strong possibility of a fruit shortage this year due to drought, fires, supply chain, absolutely everything that's happening with everything else in the world is also affecting fruit. So we locked in a fruit contract with our fruit supplier, so we know exactly what we're going to have between now and next fall. So that let us really plan out what this sour series is going to look like. So they're currently all going to be fruited sours.
Good, those sell better.
So we'll see if we stick to that. But the plan is that these will be around for approximately 2 months before the next one comes out. So Genus Prunus is right at the end of its life here, and the new one should be coming out next week. And that will be a pear rhubarb sour saison.
Do we have a name for that yet?
Oh, 2 weeks time. Sorry. I believe it's going to be called Social Fabric.
Oh, we did have our obligatory question about Labour Party earlier as well. Are we getting Labour Party again this year? This town loves Labour Party. What can I say?
Okay. Maybe it. Every time we release a beer like that, re-release a beer like that, everyone's like, "Oh, it's gonna fly." Everybody loves it, and we make more and more of it every time. And this year, I mean, it still sold incredibly quickly, but we also don't want to lose what makes it special. So it will possibly come out this year. I'll say that much.
All right. No, you know what? I respect that you guys are looking at this and be like, well, we could make a lot of money just releasing Labor Party, but we kind of want to make this wit that we have no idea if it'll sell. That's I like your disdain for making money but not making the beer you want to make. I really like that.
um, I just don't want to take anything away from playing the hits. You know, I don't like they're special for a reason, and I think if we were just to sort of make it on a schedule, you'd definitely be taking something away from that.
I mean, really, if it was entirely based on sales, you'd keep making terrestrial magnetism, losing 50 cents on every can.
Yeah. I can say with almost all certainty that we probably won't be making that beer again this year.
Do we want to talk about that a little bit? Because it's got to be the most expensive beer you've ever made, just with the amount of hops that go into it. And it was a spectacular IPA. I mean, if I'm going to be very honest, it was probably my favorite Annex beer of this year. Was the Return of Terrestrial Magnetism. Do you want to talk about it and why it can't really come back unless maybe it's in the 500 ml bottles because it's just prohibitively expensive to make?
There's just a huge amount of hops that go into it. And I don't know, like it's an expensive beer. I mean, you buy it, so you know how expensive it is. But people seem to look less at the price these days. If I'm going to be completely honest, which is a good sign. I mean, I think people are buying more based on brand recognition. And if there are other breweries, local breweries that are charging, upwards of $25 a 4-pack.
Who the bloody hell's charging? I mean, I have stuff at $22.95 a 4-pack from 88. And I think that's scraping the ceiling. Who the hell's charging $25 a 4-pack? And how can I get on this racket?
They're out there, and so. Yeah, when you make something special and you're expecting to charge like 21, 22, it's not out of this world. So, and you know what? It's making something, I think that's the point, is just making something special. You're not charging that much just for the sake of charging that much. And people can really understand, what goes into that beer and why you're justified in charging that. So,
forgive me, Aaron. I clicked on the link that Eric posted about communism in Lethbridge, and then promptly lost my comment feed, which was a terrible mistake. Give me just a moment here. There we go. Now we're back. Ish. There we go. Yeah, and they tend to be very high alcohol beers. That's fair. We're going to have a Labour party in Lethbridge's Red Square. I'd be up for that party. Yes. I think that'd be a good party. So I was actually, something you said actually twigged something for me. Why are Annex's 4-packs so cheap? Like, you're significantly less than kind of the other big famous social media buzzworthy breweries like 88 and Cabin. Like, you're regularly coming in like $1 or $2 a 4-pack cheaper. Is that just a this is what we charge thing, or is it a branding strategy? Why are you guys so darn good value?
I think that actually comes from not even looking at what our competitors were charging for a long time. So we're paying more attention to that, and unfortunately, due to the rising costs, there probably will be another price increase on the horizon here. But we've only ever had one, I think, for our core beers in the past 3 years. So yeah, there'll most likely be another price increase coming. And our core beers, we want them to be accessible. We want that to be the introduction to our brand. And then once you're sort of familiar with that, you'd be more willing to pay a little bit more for the small batch stuff, the special stuff. And then finally, the food or age beers and the bottles and stuff that we release.
I'm still amazed considering the fooders are visible the second you walk into the brewery. The people are like, "Oh, you have a fooder program?" No, they're for decoration.
Honestly, yeah, they it's still lost on people, really. Um, and I mean, maybe that's part of like having them at the forefront, that they're just so obvious that people look right past them.
I didn't think of it like that, but yeah, you might be right. At this point, I actually treat them as part of the furniture, and I actually found myself wondering the last time I was there, it's like, is there actually beer in those, or those are like they're used up fooders? So it's like, oh yeah, Alex hasn't actually been in business long enough for them to have used up fooders. So
And unfortunately, the beer sits there for so long and just does its thing that it's not like you see brewers attending those very frequently. Like if you're hanging out, like they check on them periodically, but beer's just hanging out in there for 6 months to a year. So there's not much really going on a day to day.
no, there wouldn't be. I mean, if you're opening it up, you're just exposing it to the possibility of infection every time you open that lid. It's better to just leave them be.
That's right.
All right, so I'll pose the hard question. If gun to your head, what's the hot new style for 2022?
I think we're gonna continue to see more lagers, craft lagers. We started to see a bit more of that this year, and like I said, I think it's as breweries grow, they're able to um, start scheduling them in a little better. They have a better understanding of what their brewery is capable of. The brewery's growing; they're getting more tanks, and they're able to make more lagers. We're discussing doing interesting things with lagers, can conditioning, fruiter aged. Like we'll see what happens. So, and then I think we'll see some more West Coast IPAs as well.
I'm actually going to go and say that this is the harbinger of things to come, not necessarily wits, but styles that are less focused on hops. We have been, and even for me, who is a dyed-in-the-wool, to-the-bone hophead, I love IPA. It's been a bit much the last 2 years. I think we're going to see a little bit of malt. I think we're going to see wits. We might see ESBs. We might see more brown ales, red ales, ambers, because I'm seeing it from our restaurants. They're like, so we have IPA, we have sour, we have a lager. What do you have in like an amber or a red or a brown? I'm starting to see people getting back into some of those maltier styles, which for a while there I was kind of lumping into other doesn't sell. I'm kind of hoping we're going to see something in that amber red as a growth thing, and maybe it'll be wit or something like it, but I think it'll be like an amber ale or red ale that really pushes us forward. And we've seen a lot of push that direction with ESBs, which granted they're not that dark, but they're a little bit in that malty direction. I kind of think that we might see red ale or amber be the big push this year, and I'm hopeful for that because it'd be nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see people play around a bit more with malt and see what's possible and really dial some of those styles in. I think, unfortunately, like people tend to not reach for them as much, so breweries are hesitant to brew them. But I think as people are getting more and more comfortable with putting out extremely small batches, you might see some breweries putting out some pretty special, maltier beers.
Now let's talk a little bit about like tank size with that. I know that you probably use very large tanks for forward progress and force majeure and all your core beers versus, I assume you use like a quarter of the size tank for like your special batches, or?
Nope.
No?
we have 20 hec fermenters, 30 hec fermenters, and we just got a 45 hec fermenter. We are expecting another 45. We bought it sometime early last year. So usually the turnaround on those is a few months. I think last we heard it's still in port somewhere Uh,
Where's it coming out of?
on on our scheduling board, our scheduling whiteboard in the brewery, the its tank number is there, and then it just says China boat ? And it said that for the last 6 months, so who knows. But yeah, I mean, the 45 heck is being used a lot for idle hands, for instance, just because it takes so long. Forward progress, we haven't. I don't think we've put any small batch through that yet. But it's easier to space out 20 heck batches, some small batch if we're doing a couple batches of it. But then, some of these small batches are only 20 hex, and due to the yield, we'll only see. I think borrowed time ended up being 14 hex, is what we got out of it. So that's about as small as it gets for us.
I was actually going to ask this question, but Craig actually asked it. What's a hectoliter in terms of like cans or kegs? Like, how many cans does one? Assuming a can say half a liter, how many cans does a hectoliter fill?
So a hectoliter is 100 liters, so it would be 250 liter kegs, about 11. What is that? Is that nine flats or so?
9 flats would be 96. 10 flats would be 120. So no, that's more cans than that at half a liter. No, I'm thinking dozens, not flats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I started out as a wine guy. I still think of everything in dozens, but yeah, 8 flats is 16, which is 180 or 192. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, it'd be 9 flats of beer, so 45 times 9. Yeah, that's a lot of cans of beer.
Yeah, and I mean, with what's happening now, unfortunately, with bars and restaurants just being decimated by COVID again, we kind of have to switch between packaging into kegs and packaging into cans. We decide that ahead of time, and ordering labels. We order a specific amount of labels, and then once those are gone, everything else kind of has to end up in kegs. So yeah, unfortunately, we are trying to package a bit more into cans these days. But hopefully, bars and restaurants can sort of get going again and sell some more kegs.
Probably a question no one else is going to care about, but I'm actually curious. If you order a pint in the tap room, does it come off a keg, or is it coming off like a small bright tank in the back?
No, that is a good question. It does come off kegs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you bear with us here for just a minute, Rupert? We're going to talk about what's coming out next week, and then we will get into the Baltic Porter. Next week, so that will be January 12th, we are doing Canada Does Germany. Now, one of the beers I'm putting in front of you right now is, in fact, not on the tasting, and that's this one, but it's a black and white can. I'm actually out of Establishment My Best Friend's Girl Kolsch, so it's a black and white can. It's standing in for that. That will be Establishment My Best Friend's Girl Kolsch. So we're going to do 2 beers by far. We're going to do Dunkel and their Hefe, and then we're also going to do the new, at least new for Alberta, Forwin's Hufgold German-style Pils, which is an absolutely incredible Pilsner. This was actually our impetus for doing this. And also, I had some time to think after I took kind of some time off after Christmas, and was like, I've never done Far, and there's some other breweries that I've never really touched on and never really done justice to. So we're going to be taking a little bit of time. We are going to do a couple more retrospectives of 2021 like we're doing with Rupert tonight, particularly with Jesse from 88 coming up. But yeah, I did want to do something a little more German influenced, particularly talk about Far, and the Hufgold gave me the permission to do that because this Pilsner rules. So that is coming up next Wednesday. 4 packs will be ready tomorrow afternoon just because our Connect shipment is delayed by a day because of the Christmas holidays. But yes, Germany done by Canada next week. So that is coming up. Now, let's drink some Baltic Porter because I do love me a Baltic Porter. Now, speaking of lagering, Baltic Porter, do you want to walk us through the style?
Sure, yeah. So all porters are ales other than Baltic Porter, which is a dark lager. Actually we use the same yeast as we do for Idle Hands. I believe it came about in the 19th century, obviously in the Baltic region. It's a cousin to Imperial Stouts. So it's a beer that sort of the fishermen needed to keep them warm. And I think that's, basically the gist of a Baltic Porter. Higher ABV.
Higher ABV, lagered instead of ale yeast, rich.
Baltic Porter borrowed time comes in at 8.4%. So,
and kind of it has such a red rope licorice fruity richness from the lagering. It's not as spicy and as fresh as an ale, but it's got such a unique character. I love Baltic Porters. I wish we saw more of them. But again, lagering is very expensive, making tank space to D. And the higher the alcohol in the beer, the more it takes time and tank space and resources. God, this is pretty. It has such a nice smokiness to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to pick the wit ahead of it, but I really like this.
It's funny that I think some people say that the aroma of this beer is kind of lost, but I think know.
Those people are crazy because the aroma of this beer is fantastic.
I completely agree with you. The malt bill or the grain bill for this is totally crazy too. We were talking about that earlier. There's 2-row black malt, debittered black malt, Carafoam, chocolate malt, Munich 1, Munich 2, and oats, all in this beer.
I love that. I love that it's so interesting. And debittered malt's so unique because it has that very odd, like red lollipop, red berry characteristic to it. And I certainly get some of that on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, again, Annex, it's dry hopped. So all German hops in this. Hallertau Blanc, Mandarina, and Saz, all in this as well.
Now you put Mandarina in my head, I'm kind of getting like Terry's chocolate orange things from this, which I probably shouldn't, but
are you not
definitely a light citrusiness to this.
Are you not a fan of the Terry's chocolate orange?
No, I'm just saying that I've had this beer a few times now, and up till you said the word Mandarina, I didn't get the citrus component, and now it's really prominent, and I'm not sure if that's what you put in my head or if I've always tasted it and ignored it.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I definitely get like the dark fruit. Yeah, I don't know.
And Eric, I get your point that the friends who can't smell this might have COVID. I would actually say that for me at least, I took all these beers out of the fridge almost exactly an hour ago. This has been sitting here just chilling out, gradually warming up. If you're having this beer at fridge temperature, it might not smell, well, it definitely won't smell this expressive. The fact that this is, not much more than cool is allowing the aroma to really burst from the glass.
That's a very good point, yeah.
I quite like that. And okay, everybody else is saying that they don't get the citrus, so it's just that you put Mandarina in my head. So it's just me.
Unfortunately, I think Baltic porters and porters in general are something that people don't necessarily reach for. They're a style that everyone's kind of like, oh, you guys should make a porter. And then you make one and no one buys it. And then nobody buys it. But yeah, I mean, Borrowed Time sold out so quickly. It was just perfect timing for that as well. I think it was between re-releasing Ego Death and doing something new. So we decided to do something new this year. So
I find that interesting because I don't think I have that many stouts on this shelf, but I have so many porters right now. I had somebody who was looking specifically for dark beer yesterday. No, Monday. And they're like, what do you have for new stout? Someone's like, oh, I have this. Oh, it's a porter. Oh, I have this. Oh, it's a porter. Oh, I have this. Oh, it's a Baltic Porter. I think porters are more common than you might give them credit for, at least on my shelves anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's always that time of year that they all pop up at the same time.
Like that time where everybody made a pineapple beer seasonal the same week 2 summers ago. Like everybody had a pineapple beer.
Exactly. I mean, we've talked about this before. A lot of the breweries have the same suppliers, so when you see that, it's usually just a case of something's become available that usually isn't, and everybody sort of grabs it at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think dry stouts become a bit of a rare one. Like in terms of Alberta brewed dry stouts, I'm thinking like Alberta Crude's the only Irish dry stout brewed in Alberta that I can think of. It's not exactly a common style, unless you can think of another one, Rupert. Like,
no, I'm unfortunately, it's something that like I don't even reach for anymore. Like I don't think about it. I was just recently in the UK, so I was kind of revisiting all these styles that I don't normally go for.
So what did you find over there that was exciting? Like what did you have that you were like, I need to have more of this in my life?
I went to the John Harvey's Brewery, which has been around for 230 years, and had a cask bitter that just kind of blew my mind. And it's like it's not a beer that I would ever reach for in North America, but it was unreal. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to just sit there and drink them all day long.
So coming up in 2022, Annex Bitter, soon to replace Force Majeure in the core lineup.
I think that would probably make some of our brewers pretty happy. They always kind of want to make those styles, and I think I'm the one that the force against it. That's just saying like, please no. So
I have to sell this to eat.
Yeah.
So we immediately, the second I said bitter, cask bitter, would Annex make a cask bitter for us? This is a bitter loving crowd, I gotta say.
That's awesome. That's really refreshing.
If Annex does a bitter, I'll go in on a cask. Any takers? We'd pay $25 for the pitch on a cask. It's a bitter loving crowd.
I think it would be fun to start doing a few more cask nights. It is something that's kind of come up a little bit in the last couple months. But I don't know. It's such a lot of work goes into it, and nobody really seems to care about them. But maybe we just need to take this party to Lethbridge.
Yeah, all you have to do is make bitter for Lethbridge, and everybody will be happy. We'll just have a constant cask sitting on the end of the bar. But no, I'm stoked for bitter. I think that'd be fun. We sell out of bitter whenever we bring a new one in. I think the last one we got was Great Expectations by Cabin, and that went very quickly. So, no, I mean, bitters do well for us at least. So, if your brewers are, if they're pushing for a bitter, maybe don't hold them back all the way. Let them have a little bit of a bitter as a treat.
Well, it'd be a treat for me too, just not to sell.
Outstanding. Well, Rupert, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you to Rupert for joining us, and I'll talk to you after we get off camera here just for a minute. And thank you to all of you for joining us. This has been our Annex year in review for 2021. I promise that the next time I get to Calgary, I'll get a new Annex glass so that I can have that back. Yeah, my pick for the night is going to be the Staircase Wit for me, followed by the Baltic Porter because it rules. These two are really close. The Pils for me, and although it's a fine sour, something has to come forth, and I'm just going to put it behind the Pils because the Pils I really like. So, yeah, and Kevin, thank you for saying it. Annex is def your fave. I'm kind of coming around to Annex has always been, I think I've been saying this for a few years. It's in the top 5 like most relevant, most interesting Alberta breweries, full stop. They're my top two now. Them and the folks like next door, they're 1 and 2 for me, and I really respect what they're doing right here. So I'm glad we got to do an Annex night. This was very much one for me because I love what they're doing. Thank you all for indulging me on this one. We will see you next week for our Canada Does Germany week. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will talk to you next time. Good night.